Hello and welcome to a CU Boulder Flight Operations supplemental video covering logbooks and training folders. After you've completed your first in-person training event in which you conduct a ground and flight portion, your instructor will share with you a couple files and request you fill out your logbook. Per current FOM regulations, PICs are required to fill out 2 logbooks for every flight, your personal logbook and a master logbook. To do this, you can expect your instructor to share with you a folder on Google Drive titled In Your Last Name, which contains 3 files: a personal logbook, a how to file and fill out a logbook document, and a personal letter. Your instructor will also share with you and/or grant you access to edit the master logbook. You can find these files by going to your Google Drive and searching under the Shared with Me tab, where you may also receive an email notification with a link to these files. We will now go through how to file and fill out these logbooks. Information on logbook regulations, specific logbook terms can be found in the FOM. Some important things to point out are that 2 logbooks must be filled out after each flight. Flight time is logged in tenths and rounded to the nearest tenth of an hour, and the applicant has 24 hours to fill out these logbooks. This is an absolute time requirement, as the department needs to report these times to the FAA. The FOM also provides extreme detail as to what different crew positions entail, and this may be helpful when filing logbooks for larger, more complex missions. During initial training, before students are certified on any certain category, class, and type of UAS, they will not be able to log PIC time. During this time, they will be receiving dual instruction from a certified flight instructor who will be taking the role as PIC. Students will, however, be able to log PAC-M time, or Pilot Controls Manual time. Okay, jumping into specifics, let's look at how to first fill out your personal logbook. So here we're inside your personal logbook. As you can see, the logbook title is essentially your last name followed by logbook. The first entry here, assuming this will be your first logbook entry, the whole logbook will be blank, but for demonstration purposes, a couple items have been filled out. We'll go through every column. You have a date column, in which case you just put the date. The next column is UAS type column. So in this case, depending on the UAS type, Mavic 2, Inspire, whatever the UAS type or name is, you'd put that there. In the third column, you put the aircraft registration, which is a commercial registration that you've received from the FAA when you registered your drone. You then populate the location column. In this case, BAS stands for Boulder Aero Modeling Society, or the Boulder Model Airport. That location can change. Could be CU South Boulder, depending on where you're flying. Just populate that and make that as accurate as possible. The next column is the COA column. So you'd put the COA identifier there. Although flight service takes older COAs, and sometimes we have to file the NOTAMs in flight service with older COAs, make sure this COA column is actually populated with the COA that you are flying under. After you've completed that column, we'll now move on to the time columns. As you can see, the time columns have certain titles which closely relate to what you might find in the FOM or the how to fill out your logbook document. Here we can see we have a PIC column. If you are filling out the logbook for the first time, or this was your very first training event, and you were receiving instruction and you weren't previously certified, you're technically not allowed to log PIC time. In this case, that would be 0. You would, however, because you're getting dual instruction, be able to log Pilot Controls Manual time. So in this case, let's just say you flew for roughly 15 minutes. We would round that up to 0.3, and you would log 0.3 in your PAC-M column. PAC-O, because we don't typically run ground stations during training events, would remain 0. The dual column is also a numerical column, in which case you would enter any times that you've been given dual or dual instruction. So typically in your first training events, this will be the same as your PAC-M column. In this case, you see 0.3. Because you weren't explicitly a VO, you'll log 0 in the VO time. In the landing section, you can add any landings that you did. Typically you want to keep track of how many landings you're doing. So in this case, first training event looks like we did 2. And then you put instructor's initials. So any instructor initials that your instructor's initials for that day, you can go ahead and put in, and then any comments you have based on the training event. It could be very broad, it could be very specific. This column is mostly for you. And that's how you would initially fill out your personal logbook for a initial training event. Moving on, if you were to say, feel confident in your training event and move on to take a check ride, or you will to fill out your logbook after you've been certified as PIC, this next column highlighted here would be how you'd go about doing that. And as you'll see, it varies a little bit with the time section, and we'll jump into that shortly. The date section, UAS type, aircraft registration, location, COA sections are all the same. But as you can see here, there's some differences in the time sections. So after you're certified, or when you're going to take a check ride, you're actually acting as PIC, you'd be able to log PIC time. So let's just say this flight took 11 minutes. We would round that to 0.2. And because you were acting as PIC, you would log PIC time. So in this case, we have 0.2 logged in PIC time. If you flew for that entire time, you would log the PAC-M category as 0.2 as well. And you wouldn't receive dual if you were acting PIC on a mission per se. You weren't acting as VO, you'd log that as 0, and you'd record your landings. You wouldn't have to put your instructor initials in, and then you'd leave any comments you'd like. Moving on to the third column or third example, this could be more of a mission related entry. Once again, the first few columns are the same, but let's just say, the mission was 30 minutes. And in that time, you had a crew where you were the PIC who was responsible for the safety and legality of the entire mission, but you also had a couple pilots, of which, you were a pilot for the very beginning, and then you pre-briefed that you guys would alternate pilots. One person would fly manually, the other person would, man the ground station or control things on the ground station. So if you flew manually for this mission, for the beginning portion of this mission, let's say 0.2, but then you also operated or manned the ground station for 0.3, you could log that as such. You're obviously not receiving dual in your first mission or on a mission you're doing by yourself. You'd record your landings the same as you had in other days. You wouldn't have to list an instructor, and you can list any comments you'd like. You can also log VO time. So you can log VO time in a very similar manner to what we have been doing, but in this case, in the times column, pretty much everything is blank, but you have a VO entry, said, hey, you were a VO for a coworker on a department project, and you're able to keep track of your VO times. So this is how to fill out the personal logbooks. Once you are PIC and logging PIC time, pretty much just after the first training event or first 2 training events or 3 training events, if additional flying in the training events are required. Once you are PIC and logging PIC time, it's your responsibility to fill out both logbooks. So we've now reviewed the personal logbook. Let's review the master logbook. So diving into the master logbook here, you'll notice a couple differences. The first one being the title, it'll say master logbook or flight log. This file will be shared with multiple people, so you'll see edits that aren't yours, and this thing will be continuously updated throughout the days. You may also see tabs or statements such as previous data archived, because the department has to send this data off to the FAA. But this is very similar to your personal logbook, except it's a little more cut and dry. So as you can see, we still have a date column, we have a UAS column, we have a COA column. In this COA column, we either put Part 107 or the specific COA ID that we're flying under. Next column is a PIC column. So this once again would just be your last name. Your flight time. This flight time relates pretty heavily to the PIC time that you would log in your personal folder. And then any comments about the mission. This can be more broad and less personal, like, mission for XYZ department. And the last 2 columns here, COA rules or Part 107 rules, just require you to put an X under which one you're flying under. So if you're flying under COA rules, you put an X. If you're flying under Part 107 rules, you put an X. Here you can see multiple different examples of different ways you would fill out the master logbook. Now that the logbooks are out of the way, you may hear your instructor talk about training folders. Training folders are what the department and the instructors use to track a student's or your progress throughout the flight training program. It's simply a manila folder in which paper logs are stored that your instructor populates to include different notes on if you've completed a ground school or certain training events, or if you had any check ride attempts or any new aircraft certifications. These folders are held securely by the department and don't serve much relevance to students or yourself or applicants. But if you would like to see your folder, you can request that from the DO and we can share that with you. This concludes the CU Boulder Flight Operations Supplemental Video and Logbooks and Training folders. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of your day.